Welcome to the Talk Shop, Candidate Awareness Tour 2024. And this edition brought to you by Martindale's Western Store, H&R Block, and the UPS Store, along with our good friends at Perkins Restaurant and Bakery, I-80 Towing and Automotive Services, Wholesale Fireworks, and Pole Mountain Pharmacy, dedicated to the health and wellness of Southeast Wyoming from their location at 4th and Harney. We've got in-studio guest Chris Cleven, County Commissioner candidate for Albany County. And welcome, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me out here this morning.
It's absolutely a better show when we have people like you on it. And I had the opportunity to see you at a couple engagements in the campaign trail so far. But I'm really glad that you accepted the invitation to this opportunity on air and online with your interview here this morning. So thank you for taking us up on that.
Absolutely. Thanks for giving the opportunity.
And in your county commissioner pursuits, how about introducing, for those that don't know you, introduce yourself for those that may not be familiar with Chris Cleven.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm Chris Cleven. I'm running for county commissioner for Albany County here. I've moved here back in 1999 and got married in 2000, and we have 5 amazing children between my wife and I, and it's just an amazing time here in Albany County. We call this home. There's been couple of different type of careers, I guess you could say, I've had. First, I actually was a WyoTech student, ended up going to become a GM master technician up at the old days was Berman Motors.
Okay.
And then from there, ended up going back and teaching at WyoTech, and ended up getting hired on with the police department back in 2007. And I've been with the Laramie PD since 2007. So looking at continuing my public service, just in a different realm.
Did you do peace officer training at Douglas?
Yes, I did. Every officer in the state has to go through there, unless they're able to kind of transfer in as a lateral. But yeah.
Very good. Very good. Well, we covered the who, what, where, when, why, and how kind of perspectives on candidacy. If you don't mind sharing, what have you recognized as you have been campaigning? What are the key issues that you recognize face Albany County in the commissioner realm forward?
Yeah. One of the big ones I would say is going to be roads. I mean, probably the largest road thing that a road issue that's come up anytime recently is going to be the Boswell Road. That's a tricky one. That's a intricate situation that has to deal with the landowners. It's going to deal with the federal government, with the Forest Service, as well as the county. For years it's just kind of been out there, but at the same time, people have been using it. It's a great resource. I mean, the amount of people that come up out of Colorado that use our national forest, and it's just going to get even more crowded. So we need to be able to look at roads. We also need to be looking at regulations, trying to figure out how we can restore some of the property rights. There's a lot of people out there that are really frustrated with some of the different regulations that were put in place. It's not what I feel like is they didn't do any good jobs explaining the why behind some of these regulations. It's more of, okay, let's just do this because it's an emotional feeling. It's not actually sticking to the Constitution as well as state statutes.
When I first became aware of the Boswell Road situation, it was attending a session that many of the landowners attended, and they've been relying on this road access. Many of the area citizens, that landowners and people that are around there, they're running cattle through this gateway, and they're doing a number of things that they've been doing for more than 20 years. How does an issue go indefinite? I mean, in such a vague way for so long, and what changed that heightened the awareness of it from your perspective, what can you tell?
Well, as far as how this could happen, we're Wyoming. We help each other out. I mean, I live on a road.
Neighbors, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I live on a road, a dirt road, that almost had the exact same situation. It's a private road going over people's land. Some people had easement, some people didn't. But you can't block off the road because then you're blocking people that had legal easement, and then it just become a fight. And so that's the idea of how it happened. I think it's just we're Wyoming. We help each other out. We work with each other. It's not a big deal. And I think part of the problem comes from when people abuse the road or the landowners get frustrated because of the volume on it, and then that's when they end up either locking the gates or looking into it a little bit deeper, and they feel like they have the capability to actually block access. I've talked with.
And what's at stake here? Really, what's at stake? If the Forest Service take full responsibility or shared responsibility, it really comes down to if the county does, who's going to service the road?
Correct.
And money.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's one of those things you have to look into what's called like a road district. Now, there's probably not as many landowners as there are on my road, which makes it much more useful because we get to have a lot more people chipping in to maintain the road. But when it comes down to that dirt road, I've talked to a Forest Service official that without being able to go into too much detail, it was pretty much like this isn't that big of a deal. It's not that where the road is now, if we had to make an adjustment, it's not that far off. The way that I learned about it is actually talking with somebody while I was getting some ice and water over there on Snowy Range Road. And I introduced myself, and it turns out that was a big issue to them. And that was one of the first issues that I learned about while I was campaigning and started looking into it a little bit. So I think it's actually an easy resolution. Do I think it's gonna take a little bit of time? Probably, because anytime you deal with the federal government, they're slow. It's going to be that way. But I think that as long as somebody stays on top of it and actually focuses on it and says, let's solve this problem, it's solvable. It's just a matter of getting to the end goal.
Fantastic. So certainly roads, one issue.
Mm-hmm.
Other issues?
Going to be property rights. I've heard, I've just by doing this campaigning, I've heard some different landowners that have tried to subdivide their property. They've had permission from their neighbors. They've had, I shouldn't say permission, but agreeance from their neighbors. They've had agreeance from the homeowners associations. And let's face it, those are the regulating bodies that person agreed to when they bought that property. And it goes into the Planning and Zoning Commission. And what most people don't realize is when it goes in front of open record, I believe it's the clerk actually brings it forward and he identifies that it is not in violation of state statute. There's nothing statutorily prohibiting this. That right there should be a key to the rulemaking people to tune in a little bit and say, we have to remove emotion out of it. The law doesn't tell us what we can do. The law only tells us what we can't do. And if it says that we're allowed to do it, then it shouldn't be up to an individual person on a panel to say, well, that's not quite the design that we were looking for on that area. If you've got the people in the area that want to do it, and you got the landowner that has the right to do it, then they need to be allowed to do it. One of my neighbors just ended up doing a subdivision as well. For the last 15 years that I've lived out in the county on my property, I built my house furthest away from that edge, knowing that eventually there's going to be some houses built up there. Well, now it's finally coming. Talking to that individual, what should have been probably a $6,000-7,000 subdivision to go through the property lines, the assessor, and all the different notifications, turned into $40,000 because of attorney's fees, simply because some of the different, the planning and zoning, as well as the county commissioners, they were too worried about the septic systems in an area that is not even in the Casper Aquifer Protection Zone, instead of looking at simply what they were talking about, which was lines on the ground. And so when you start thinking start bringing emotions into it and start taking away people's property rights to where they can't do what they want to do, that's when we are continually having problems. And that's what I'd like to get in here and fix, is go back to exactly what's in here with just the Constitution for the state of Wyoming, as well as the Constitution for the U.S. and state law.
Any other interests in the public making it into the top three?
So going to be property rights, going to be the roads. It's the third one's going to be restoring your voice. Uh, I went back and took a look on the archives for the correspondence between the citizens and the county commissioners, and it's really interesting that one of the county commissioners is pretty clear that she is answering questions very specific and answering that person for what their question is. But then you start taking a look at some other commissioners and you start looking at their actual responses. They're just a cookie cutter response from one person to the next with very few changes in it. What that tells me is they're not actually even listening to that person. They're not actually evaluating what they have to say. If there is a true concern about something, then let's go address that. The easiest one, obviously, is going to be one of the larger issues with the protection zone. There was some argument whether or not the well casings were actually failing, which was resulting in the higher nitrate levels. Let's go out there. Let's have somebody inspect it. If that's an argument, whether it's for or against, but let's go out there and inspect it. That's what I do every day for a living. Is I actually look at the facts, I listen to people, and I'm able to actually come up with a determination on what we have to do.
Why run for county commissioner today? Why you? Why today?
Yeah, why today? We've been praying about it for years, my wife and I. We've been seeing how things have been going for the last, probably 5-6 years or so, and recognizing that sooner or later, you have to step up. One of my big things that I used to always talk to some of my friends and stuff when they wouldn't vote. I said, hey, you can't complain if you don't vote. At least go figure out who you're going to vote for and go vote. And having 5 kids, raising them up to where they've all understood the Constitution. They understand what the amendments are. They understand where our rights came from. You got to be able to stand up and show them. If you're willing to, you got to be willing to fight for what you believe in. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running for county commissioner. To get more specific on your timing, right now, this is where I'm feeling called that I should run for county commissioner. In the years past, a good friend of mine has been Heber. And so this year, since Heber's not running, I said, this is the time. Let's go.
For those that are just joining us, we're visiting with Chris Cleven, county commissioner candidate for Albany County. If we were to ask you about the 8 initiatives for property tax relief in Albany County and the state of Wyoming as a whole, are there any that are you've identified that seem the best fit for all stakeholders?
One over the other, I don't know. And the reason being is when you're talking about 8 different ones on there, I have reviewed them, but to recite them off memory, I don't know them off memory. I'd have to have it. Is there a general
principle that you have from your materials? You note your campaign materials that you're committed to working within budget, not expanding government. That led me to ask the question that I do with respect to your perspective on tax, because there's a surplus of revenue in the bank,
Yes.
if you will, for our government, and that tells me that we've been taxed higher than our need.
Correct.
And I hear a spin on if we cut taxes, if we allow relief, we're going to lose social services. That seems to be a fear, infusion of fear.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's more real than I realize. And you never, do you ever know what your insurance covers until you had to put it to the test? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's kind of the way that it seems that government goes. If we don't fund this tax, or we don't have this penny sales tax, or we don't have this, that, we don't know what the ripple effect necessarily will actually come to be. But in general, do you have a perspective on that you'd like to expand on at this time, given your campaign pledge, that we don't need bigger government.
Yeah, absolutely. As a business owner, I own DriveSmart, actually the only privately owned driver's education in the entire state of Wyoming. You have to work within your budget. You can't. We don't have any loans. We don't have any type of debt involved in that. It's just a matter of working within your budget. You don't look at trying to raise the money to go out and build a bigger government. One of the things that I've done is our road district that I'm a part of. It was 6 years ago when we actually formed it, but it started probably about 9 years before that. And not only did I spearhead the actual road district, which is a formation of a road district in our county in the last decade, that's actually taken place, but within that road district, several other people and myself developed rules and regulations to take that road district and allow it to have funding, just like you would think of a government, because a road district is an entity now within the county. And we're allowed to do what we need to do for the road, but we're putting handicaps in place to make sure that people weren't going to get priced out of their living there at their house because of the road maintenance agreements and the rates that future board members would charge. So there's handicaps in place to make sure that we can do what we need to do with the road, but yet at the same time, we're not sitting here and just having excess money and saying, hey, do we want to do a walking path for our area? Do we want to do certain things? When you have extra money, you start looking at different ways to spend it rather than saying, okay, we need to get ABC done. How do we do that? Yes, there's going to have to be cuts. And I'm not saying like cuts to social services or cuts to essential services. I'm talking about the waste and taking a look at whether or not is the spending of that fund going to actually benefit the majority or a large portion of the community? And if it's not, then why are we spending that kind of funds? Now, somebody could look at that. One of the arguments I had on that is if we graded a road up off of Fetterman Road, that's not benefiting very many people in the community. However, it does because the agriculture that part of the community provides to our county also brings in more revenue too. So there's more than just one specific aspect you have to look at. You got to look at the entire totality of the picture.
How important is due process to governance and representing the citizens of Albany County?
It's paramount. You have to have due process. Due process, if you don't have due process, you are taking away people's rights of being able to address a situation and actually have a voice. People have to be able to have the opportunity to speak. They have to be able to show their side, to have an argument. Without it, all it is a dictatorship. You're not actually being able to listen to people and make an informed decision on what you're actually deciding to do.
As you've campaigned and as you've been a citizen in Albany County, have you witnessed violations of due process throughout your experience?
Oh, yes, many times.
And are there currently entities that are benefiting from taking advantage of not giving that due process to public comment and those rights then circumvented in some people's perspectives? They've had their rights violated in that failure to give due process. It just seems that our world is getting more complex, not simpler.
Yeah.
And if we were simple, everyone would understand it. You'd have great clarity.
Yeah. And
there'd be absolutely no question, no controversy on wind power or rail tie or any of those kind of issues. That's not an issue. Energy is not an issue that you mentioned in your top three. But where does energy come in? And due process matters and concerns seem to be what I hear in conversation floating about. I read in the newspaper recently that there's a body of landowners that feel like their rights were violated. Have you heard conversations in that realm?
Specifically, are you talking about with the wind projects?
Yeah,
okay.
my fundamental deal is due process and a follow up and in due process. What examples have you seen where you're concerned by due process questions and
Yeah.
and your vision for the future of Albany County certainly has to take into account due process.
Yeah, honestly, for me. It comes down to property rights. What's the right of that person of that person that owns that property? You stop and take a look at people. A lot of times, people don't want something because of their view, or they have a emotional impact against that. I get it. We start taking a look at the actual wind turbines and wind projects. Personally, do I think they make sense? Not really. And the reason why I say that is simply because of the cost that's associated with the manufacturing. First off, the building of the facility to manufacture them, then the trucking to bring them into town or to bring them wherever they're going. How much fuel and how much resources are they utilizing compared to what they're actually going to produce in the lifespan that they're going to produce it? So you got to look at the full picture, not just the emotional one of saying, well, once we get it up and going, it's going to produce energy. But at the same time, I have to take my own emotions out of it and say, this is your land and you want to do this. Do the regulations allow this to happen? If they allow this to happen, then we're going to start going through the process to figure out what it's actually going to take. We're going to start listening to the different landowners, whether it's for or against. We're going to start working through that process. I don't know if you were at the League of Women's Voters, but one of the questions came up was with the wind. I'm one of the only, I could probably say for sure that I'm probably the only county commissioner candidate that actually can put their foot right down and say, I will support green energy within reason. What I mean by that, I actually just got the permission, 2 days ago, permission from Rocky Mountain Power to do an interconnect for a wind turbine on my property. Because let's face it, everybody's looking for ways to try to save $50 a month right now because of the cost of inflation, the cost of living, the cost of food, everything. And with 5 kids, it gets expensive. And so I'm putting up a wind turbine. But I'll tell you right now, the one thing that I worked off of for the wind turbine was simply the cost. When you start looking at the return on investment, I was able to buy a used wind turbine from somebody that moved into a house up in Casper that was big oil, and they said, I can't have that on my property. Cool, I'll buy it. And so now I'm putting it up, but I got it for a tenth of the cost of a brand new unit. To me, that makes sense. I'm only looking at about a 2-year return on investment versus a 25-year return on investment.
What's the subsidization of and the incentives for building these turbines in Albany County? Have you discovered any financial incentives that are being afforded to these companies that are interested in wind power, for instance?
When you start talking about subsidies, all I'm aware of is going to be the government subsidies from the federal government. Now, the details of those, I'm not.
What's your philosophic position with respect to government subsidies of private enterprise?
It's interesting you bring that up because one of the other companies I have is actually a raw milk dairy, and most people don't realize that even today milk is subsidized by the government. So when we sell our raw milk and we do the best of the best, and like we test it, you name it, it is the best protein, everything that's out there. It's anything you would think of like the new fad or the new information, that's what we have in our dairy cows. And we did it for our own personal health because that's what we believe. Trying to eat better and have better food for our kids. It's interesting when I get to talk to people, and if they don't have any background information and they just hear about the cost of our milk versus store-bought milk, it blows them away. But then, if they're willing,
gallon for gallon, what are we talking? Your milk?
Well, because of ours is A2 raw milk. It's got the whole milk, so it's got the cream on top, all of it. It's $15 a gallon.
Okay.
But that includes, that's everything.
Available straight from you?
Yep, straight from our house. Yeah. So, we have a commercial kitchen in
Shelf
our farm.
life?
Depends about between 10 to 14 days is what I recommend. But what I'll tell you, it all depends on how cold you keep it, because raw milk still has all the good bacteria in it, that just like yogurt would or something.
And do you store it in a stainless steel pitcher or
Yep.
or glass
So
or plastic, right?
It's actually milk from the cow, filtered, and then it goes in a stainless steel. They call it a bucket milker.
Yeah.
Gets poured directly into the jugs and chilled immediately. So that's what actually after we get done here, I'm heading home to go milk some cows.
I certainly digress with that, but it
Yep.
takes me just a further understanding of your position with respect to government subsidy. Is subsidy needed in your experience with milk, for instance, or others? Do you see that, or it has its time passed? Sometimes I think some things reside longer
Yeah,
than they were needed.
absolutely. Some things have resided longer than they're needed. But you know, if you have an idea and you have a concept and you're trying to build it, and when looking at one perspective and saying, okay, solar panels, I can understand when as the technology changes and solar panels become much more efficient to build and much more cost effective, then I can see where the government can step in and say, hey, we want to help get this going. We understand, just like the company, just like the website, was it Kickstarter, I think.
Okay.
It's the same idea. But after a certain amount of time, that idea, whatever, solar panels, what needs to be able to stand on its own. They need to be able to say, okay, we appreciate the help. We think this is good for our community. We think it's good for for the citizens. Let's go ahead and start doing it on our own. If we cannot break away from that subsidy, then it's not making sense. It's not actually being as useful as what people think it is. So,
What innovations are available for Albany County to consider in revenue generation?
revenue generation is an interesting topic because sometimes you have to look at how is it. Obviously, it's going to be citizens' money. That's either citizen or recreational money, something like that. This or visitor tourist money.
Tourism?
But at the same time, how is that going to affect that individual? For example, down in Denver, down in Fort Collins, you've got red light cameras. When those came out, it was pushed as, hey, these are going to stop the red lights. But at the end of the day, what they came down to was revenue generators. That is not the intent of what those were projected as, and as a selling point. And so you really have to be careful when you start talking about revenue generation. I think that some of the revenue that we generate should be, and I say voluntary, to the point of saying, if I want to go out and do certain things, then yeah, I'm going to pay, just like the ORV stickers. If you want to go out and do those things, you pay a small fee to get that sticker, and that helps support the trail maintenance. That helps support those specific areas. So I think some of the additional revenue generation can be based upon that user, and if they're using that or if they would like that, if the bill, or not the bill, it's not even a bill yet, but the ballot measure that they turned in all those signatures for the property tax thing, if that passes, or if that gets put on the ballot and then actually passes, that may be the catalyst that's needed to help try to shrink some of the size of the government. Because before that, it's going to be hard, because you're going to have a lot of people that are upset whether or not they're they might not think that the road is being maintained as well as it was in the past. But at the same time, when you've got extra funds sitting there, you're taxing people too much, and it's a little bit too hard on people.
As you approach the primary election, what do you want to make sure that people know about Chris Cleven going into the August 20th election day?
Yeah.
The primary has a lot of candidates for county commissioner.
It does.
What distinguishes you, and what do you want people to absolutely know and be aware of going into the polls?
Yeah. I will sit here and tell you from the information I've gathered from the other candidates, some of them are even my friends, even with Brian Harrington. I believe and I know that I have actually more experience with public service than all the other candidates, probably all of them combined. Not only with the financial aspect of it, I've been the treasurer for our church for probably about 8 years now, managing the funds, managing the money, organizing the road district in our county, the only road district in the last 10 years that has actually been formed. When I asked our clerk, Kayla White, hey, when was the last one formed? Her response was, I don't know. I don't have that information, because that was even before her time. That's how long it's been. And there's actually state statute that says that the county commissioners, through the county clerk, should essentially develop a plan to help with the formation of road districts. And I'm not saying that she hasn't done it or anybody hasn't done it, but we have a problem with roads, and we have a state statute that actually says this is how we're going to fix roads.
One remedy is this. Right?
Is this. And I think that's where the county commissioners have forgotten so much, and they just look at the emotional issues instead of trying to proactively say, okay, if we're going to have a problem with this area, how do we form a road district? If we're going to have a development or a subdivision of 100 different locations and residents, why don't we think about a road district right up front, so that way they can take care of their own road, they can maintain it, they're the ones using it. And so I truly have the most experience, not only with the financial aspect, honestly, going after state statute. Been a cop for 17 years here in Laramie. Before that, I was a volunteer firefighter. I was an EMT. I have a life of serving the community. And I carry around with me a statute book every day. No matter what I do, I always look at that statute book and verify to make sure that whatever is going on, that it meets the actual statute for Wyoming. I don't think that very many people even realize, just last night I was going through this again, and it's really interesting. It lays out very clearly in our Constitution where the powers are. I would highly doubt that many of the county commissioners, even now, or the ones that are even running, even know how to find the state statutes that actually give them direction under state statute, under the counties tab, to tell them exactly what their job is to do. And it starts out with maintaining the courthouse. It's that simple. And that's really what we need to come back and get to.
How will you maintain access to the public? Your access, should you be elected, how will you maintain contact with the community at large?
Well, like anybody nowadays, with the cell phone, people can easily reach me out on the cell phone with our, my campaign phone I have specifically separate there. But when I get into county commissioner, you can always contact me by email, by phone. You're easily able to go up on my website, which is www.cleven4 with a number, but cleven4cc.com. On there, it gives a great breakdown of the information about me, where my stance is, where my beliefs are, and it's a very simple site. On there, you can also donate to my cause, to my campaign, if you feel that I'm the right candidate for you. Also, some information on there. You can easily drop me a line, contact me. The phone number is listed right on there as well. So very simple, one page. There doesn't need to be a whole lot of bureaucracy in a simple web page to tell you about me.
In a final request, I haven't made this to everyone. Mm-hmm. I'll fully acknowledge that. But this week it was front of my mind again. If you're gonna restore the citizen's voice, ought we not overlap county commissioner meetings and city council meetings? Is scheduling every 2 weeks, there's an evening work session that overlaps and doesn't allow a interested citizen to attend both.
Yeah.
These are not 30-minute meetings generally. They're longer, and therefore every other week it's a 9:30 a.m. meeting, mm-hmm. a morning commissioner meeting.
Yeah.
But every other week, alternating with that, it's an evening session that overlaps the city council meetings. From a media perspective alone, I can't cover both.
Yeah, that's correct.
Is that intentional?
I don't know if it's directly intentional. Again, you can look at it from the outside and you wonder. until you actually talk to the people and to understand it, I can see the other side of it. Because I can tell you right now, with my job, I work days and at the beginning of the week, and so I can't, unless I take vacation time, I can't go to those during the daytime.
Sure.
Now, a few years ago when they were in the evenings, I was able to go to several of them, which made it useful. So it just depends on the schedule and where people are at.
Does it make any sense at all with 7 days in a week to overlap on the same time period, same day?
No, it doesn't.
I hope if you're elected, you'll be mindful of that when the commissioners set their schedule, because I do think it's commonplace that people, they go along to get along, and generally speaking they don't pay much attention.
When you start getting the hot topic items, I think they need to be on a weekend, on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Because now you're actually taking the ability for people's voice, and you're able to give them the opportunity, and as you're saying, the due process, to be able to actually communicate their side of what they believe, pros or cons. Because all too often we only hear one side of it, because it's only certain people that can actually show up, because a lot of times the people that it will affect are busy working. They're busy, on whatever job they're doing, whatever it may be. But I think, and real quick, two things.
Do it. Your time's yours.
I think that when you start talking about the cooperation between the city and the county, it absolutely has to be there. And that may be one of the topics, is saying, hey, why don't you guys change up one, or two of them per month, you go over here, or one per month, you go over here, you guys go over here. So that way they're not, at least on some of those, they're not overlapping. But it goes both ways.
Well, I'm sure it's a budget fiscally minded type thing to have all those 9:30 meetings are done during the normal workday.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely,
the public doesn't suffer in their access to the commissioners, but yet they do suffer. That's a suffer from the cash, the budget that pays people after 5 p.m. or whatever. There's a lot of things that are just unexpected when you make these type of decisions, but it just strikes me that if Tuesdays are city, Wednesdays county, and there's no
Thursdays?
There's no logistical problem with doing Thursdays or what have you. I would love to know what. It hasn't always been this way, and I only in the last year became reacquainted with the fact that it's happening.
Interesting.
To me it's a simple symptom of that we're really not cooperating with one another. We give lip service to this thing that sounds real good as a speak point, but beyond speakeasy, it's not really doing its job in the way that we want to invite the public to participate.
And that's where I think when you have those hot topic items, I think you should do something on the weekend to be available and to have a meeting on the weekend, knowing it's going to take a while because people are actually able to attend. And that should be your judge on whether or not you're at your right times. If you're not having anybody attend and people aren't vocalizing, then maybe that's not the right opportunity. And if you adjust that and now you have more people showing up, that's great, because the more people that show up, the more informed they are, and the more that just is going to be the more informed as a county commissioner you're going to be to make decisions.
Advantage County Commission, when you attend, you get an agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Now, as I read that agenda, one thing that I think from a citizen standpoint is I don't recommend agendas that are run through like a Catholic rosary. In expediting the speed of a meeting, to do consent agenda items in rote and such a drone and such almost a mumble. It becomes a mumble. It's so routine, it routinized, and it lacks the importance of each one of those elements being identified. It's not even clear in terms of a summation what that title may really involved. Now, if you research, you delve down, you dive down. How deep do you want the public to dive down in order to get the essence of what's being voted on? It could be their last. The importance from a due process standpoint, from my perspective, is that it could be our last opportunity to say yay or nay to this and make a difference.
Absolutely.
And many of these decisions you can't go back from. They are irreversible in their effect.
Yeah.
And that importance says to me it's worth more than a consent agenda room is zooming through these things to get through the speed of a meeting. While some that participate in it time in and time out understand it, I certainly can understand it. I request entirely the opposite, so that people make sure that they have that due process right with respect to it. And sometimes the public, for whatever reason, misses public open sessions and public comment periods and
don't even know about it.
And they don't even know about it. The invitation of this station via the talk shop, crickets.
Yeah.
Except for Brandon Newman in City Council.
Okay.
And Kayla White, Chelsea Matthews, and Tracy Fletcher. Anything beyond those three individuals has not taken the invitation to make the public aware on a regular basis. I would dedicate a show element. I would dedicate a segment where each agenda could be highlighted. Featured up next will be this, and this. We really need your feedback. Call for questions. Call for feedback. Take the opportunity to do those things that are available. This is a community asset. KOCA 93.5 FM has served the community going on 22 years in the community, and to do so and have that open opportunity. I'd like comments from Old Main, the president of the university. I'd like them to do that type of thing. This is a community resource, an asset that absolutely is available to the public. How many campaigners will advertise for your vote before the election, but never thank you after? They won't give you a summation of their job performance, of their happy until the next cycle, until the election cycle. I hope that changes.
Absolutely.
And, just something to think about. It's not a criticism of you in any way, shape, or form, but it's really a conversation just a conversation point that I mentioned to you as a citizen of Albany County, and hope that we can make a difference.
Absolutely.
Regardless of who's elected, we all can make a difference and influence. And when we brainstorm, when we talk openly, when we have conversations, when we learn how to agree to disagree, you get better at it with practice. And if we're genuinely caring, I think we're open to some of those simple questions being answered.
One thing I want to bring up and mention it to you is, if I was elected as county commissioner, one thing I can promise is to reduce the volume of executive sessions. Quite simply,
a lot of closed door stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of closed door stuff, and all that does is give a rise to speculation on who's getting what, why is this happening. If we can explain to people why you're doing a certain thing, why the action has to be taken, 90% of the time, they might not agree with it, but they at least understand why it's happening. And I think the information getting out to the people is what's important. And executive session, very, very few things are called out in state statute that are even allowed in executive session.
Executive session in school board, Albany County School Board, where I've witnessed it, have been utilized, it seems, in a punitive fashion to the public giving comment, to the public giving rise or reaction to conduct or proceedings. It's been used punitively, and I don't know if it's I don't know if it's an ethical or a legal thing to do,
even
but those are attorney questions. But
Yeah.
I genuinely, from my observation, would echo what you said. I would appreciate less that. It would certainly elevate my trust in that transparency
Yeah.
opening up.
Even the
And
the
sometimes
airport
sometimes I know that there's also legal requirements to do it. But if you educate, like you're saying,
It's all in statute of
It is.
exactly what is allowed and what is not allowed to be discussed during executive session, and even the airport board. I've talked to several different people that have brought up issues going on at the airport, and my first question is, why haven't the city council and the county commissioners, who are the owners of the airport, joint owners, called the airport board up and said, why? Why are we spending $80,000 a year on an attorney when everybody else in the entire region has a budget of like $2,500? Those are different things that need to take place. Talking about the actual executive session, say, why was this executive session? They should have the ability to look into what that executive session is and actually provide some oversight and say, this shouldn't have happened. How do we fix this problem? But that's where, again, it comes back to, honestly, experience. I have the experience of actually digging into laws, understanding them, figuring out what needs to be done. And the best part is actually challenging the individuals, challenging the commissions and saying, why? What are we doing here? Asking the right questions. I don't know if any of the other candidates are actually able to challenge. I can tell you right now from, on the Democratic side with Brian Harrington, I don't think he's going to be able to challenge. He's the liaison for the airport. He's not even challenged the airport board to answer questions. So if he's not going to do it there, what makes you think he's going to do it in the county commissioners? And that's what we need. We need somebody to stand up and actually talk for the people when we start talking about the boards that aren't even elected. Those are just appointed positions. So,
Chris Cleven, Albany County Commissioner candidate, today on the Talk Shop. Chris, we appreciate you joining us. And if somebody wants to get a hold of you,
yeah, absolutely.
Where's their next opportunity to meet, greet, and perhaps ask you the pertinent questions in their lives? And your last point as you finalize.
So tomorrow morning, I believe at 8 a.m., we're going to be at the Moose Lodge. They're going to have a forum for the county commissioners. So I'll be there tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Also, keep a look on our Facebook page. We also have a Facebook page going out. I'll be letting people know I'm doing meet and greets in the individual communities. So Harmony, I'm trying to arrange, Centennial, and eventually up in Rock River.
Town hall type things?
Yep.
Okay.
Just a good old time to sit down and talk.
What's the time for tomorrow's Moose Lodge opportunity?
I believe it's at 8 a.m. It's scheduled to go for about an hour.
And who's organizing that?
I believe it's the Wyoming Freedom Pack is who's actually organizing that.
Very good. And just in general, your phone number and email perhaps for folks before we close.
Phone number is 307-760-4704. And the email is just going to be the easiest way. It's going to be cleven4cc@gmail.com. And I have one last thing for you. How did expiration dates, or who came up with expiration dates for milk? Who do you think, and why?
FDA.
Al Capone. He owned dairies, and he wanted to find a way to sell more milk. So he figured about putting expiration dates on milk that people wouldn't buy it.
There's no question that there is some correlation with the taste of certain milks. I don't know the longevity of high quality milk.
A2.
High quality A2.
Absolutely.
I love it. That's good. And a nod to Bobby. We'll thanks for the trivia.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Thanks for the opportunity to get to know you and your candidacy to represent us.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.